Leggari Nation, today we're showing you the process of how we coated these countertops to give them a real concrete look. We used our amazing concrete overlay countertop kit for this project. It was a brown Formica before that didn't really bring much contrast to the kitchen. Updating the countertops made a huge difference. Before installing the kit, we did some prep work. We removed the sink and this old square backsplash. The homeowners got a new sink to match their appliances and installed a subway tile backsplash to tie it all together. This home is completely transformed. If you haven't seen the other projects we did in this home, like this amazing concrete bar or the TV mantle, we will link those in the description below. If you want to coat your surface to make it look like real concrete, visit Leggari.com to get your products today.
All right, so first thing I'm going to talk about is the sink, because when we pulled that sink out, we had some issues that a lot of older homes, when you're renovating, doing stuff like this, you're probably going to come across. So first thing, one of the pipes is leaking back there they didn't know about, so we fixed that. Simple shark bite, pop that on, that's solved. Another thing was when we dry fit the sink, the cutout was too big for their sink, so we had to actually build out this edge. And we braced it up with a 1x3. We braced it up back here because it had a little flex to it. Filled that with a piece of wood and then bonded that to fill all the seams and gaps and sanded it. The next thing we ran into was we had some water damage underneath some of these Formica. So all this was water damaged. The Formica was lifting, so we chipped all that stuff up that was loose, and the wood swelled up a little, so we sanded that down. Now there wasn't any mold or any of that. We let it all dry out, sanded that wood down, and then we filled that with Bondo as well, sanded that smooth. So the sink's basically ready to go. And we kind of checked everywhere else, because you never want to coat over Formica that's kind of peeling. Now if you have like a corner or an edge that's kind of peeled up, you can either chip that off or you can get some Gorilla Glue under there, clamp it down, let that dry, and that'll hold that down. But you always want to check your Formica, make sure there's nothing peeling. The next thing, we had a big gap on the back here, so we caulked that with paintable latex caulking. You always want to use paintable caulking. Our primers will bond to that without any issues. So all these back edges are caulked, that way we're not losing product down the back edge there. And then we sanded the tops. Now a lot of the Formica doesn't really sand easy. It's pretty hard to sand. That's okay, because our primers are specifically designed to bond, chemically bond to smooth surfaces. So awesome primer. So we're not worried about that. We just want to make sure we clean it with like some denatured alcohol to remove any contaminations that may be on there, maybe some leftover silicone, anything like that. So always clean it when you're all done sanding with denatured alcohol and a rag. And then last thing, you always want to make sure you take your time on your faces and your corners. We always want to sand those really good. We sanded the bottom edge, and this was 45, but we actually rounded it. Thought it might look a little better than a 45, so this is rounded now. Sanded it and then cleaned it. You always got to clean your edges. Anywhere you sand, clean it really good, because if you have dust or anything like that from sanding, the primers aren't going to want to bond as good. And then all the nail holes, typically if you're doing an epoxy, you would want to fill the nail holes, but our concrete overlay is a lot more forgiving for filling imperfections like that, so we don't have to fill those in this. But if you guys were doing an epoxy, make sure you're filling that kind of stuff. So these are basically ready, the tops. And then we did thick mold plastic on the floor. Always use thicker plastic on the floor. Painter's plastic's fine on all your cabinets. And then the dishwasher, we just wrap this thing up so we can open it and close it without any issues. That way we can get under here, make sure we're getting a good coat on the face. So these are ready to go. So the next thing is we're gonna put down, mix up our primer, and then we're gonna show you guys how to apply that. All right, so we got our primer mixed up. 3/8 snap roller, 6-inch little small roller. You guys can use bigger ones, obviously, if you have bigger projects going on. But we always want to de-shed our rollers. So this is a 3/8 snap roller, and I'm just going to run it on some painter's tape, and that's going to remove any loose hairs. First time using our products, we recommend using a roller tray. That's going to make you more consistent with the amount you're putting down. If you've done a lot of painting, anything like that, you can simply dump out beads down the middle, roll it out. That's going to be a lot faster. So I'll kind of do both ways here. We'll just start out with the roller tray. Take a second, soak that up. Now this primer's designed to go on very, very thin, so it's gonna go very, very far just from soaking that up one time. So I like to roll down the middle and then cross roll it. And this goes on white and it'll dry clear. That way we can see everywhere we put that primer down. Now you'll notice we've got a lot of fisheye separation. That's completely normal. This happens on some Formica. We just let this tack up a little bit and then we'll roll over it again and it'll eliminate that. So I got my top done. Now we're gonna hit all our faces. Hit that underneath edge. And then I'm just looking for thick spots, drips, runs anywhere on these faces. So this is pretty much done. So I'll just keep coating, doing that same process. And then after about 10 minutes, I'll jump back here. We'll roll this out again and you'll see how better it'll lay out. Now you can see how fast it's soaking into the wood. So say this was an MDF top or you built it or something, it's gonna wanna soak in a lot more, so you might need a little bit more primer than you would for doing, you know, over Formica, but we send out plenty for the amount of square feet that you pick. So we take that into account. Different types of surfaces, they're gonna soak it up more or less. You can just periodically jump back, roll those spots out that are kind of fish-eyeing. Might be a tad bit too early here, but we don't want to wait too long to where it just sets up like that. So it is a fast cure primer, so we want to get on it before it gets too hard. You can see back here how much it's separated. Once I kind of roll that out again, because it gets sticky, it won't do that. All right guys, so you can see how much better it lays out after it tacks up, does it fisheye and separate. So, and I'm not adding more to the roller, I'm just going around and feathering all of that out, and it gets tacky and then it doesn't do that. So this is gonna be ready in probably 45 minutes. If you guys wanna put a fan on it, it's gonna dry it out a lot faster, but once it goes clear, you'll be able to apply the first coat of the overlay. So our primer's ready. How we know is it's obviously clear now, it's glossy, and it's very sticky. So we wanna go over this when it's sticky. You never wanna apply your primer and not do your overlay over it after 2 hours. So if you're gonna prime, you have about a 1.5 to 2 hour window to apply that concrete overlay to that, or this is just gonna become a sealed surface. You'll have to sand it and reapply a new primer. So always try to prime and do your concrete overlay within that 1.5 to 2 hour window. So we're basically ready to go. We got our product mixed up here. We're just gonna pour beads out, run it all over the top with the squeegee, and then we're gonna try to minimize our drips so we just don't make a mess. As we can hold our squeegee down here, push some product off, and then pull it back up. So we're gonna do that on the whole top. And yeah, it's very, very fast and really simple. So we'll get started here. And then you always want to work from the back to the front. That way you're not leaning over and getting it on your clothes. So we'll get our squeegee on the bottom here. Run that down. And we're just going to pull it back up. And I'm not worried about it looking good right now. I'm just trying to get it all coated, and I'll come back and fine tune any runs or drips. All right, so I got a decent amount coated. So now I'm gonna go and just make sure everything's flattened off. I don't have any thick spots. And then you always wanna look under here. Make sure that's all coated. That's exactly what we're looking for, just like that. And then when we do our second coat, if there's any spots that maybe we didn't flatten off or we see that are high, we can sand down or just scrape off. So I got a little carried away on the inside this sink here. So if you get something on the walls or anything, you can just take a wet rag and it'll wipe it right off. All right guys, so before you clean your tools, these can be cleaned off with just water. They clean off really easy. If it's kind of set up on there, you can rub your hands and it'll come right off. But before you guys walk away, you want to look for any like trowel lines. Like we got a couple lumps right here, some thick spots. We just want to make sure those are flattened off. So when I'm all done, I always like to just kind of go around and check, make sure I don't see any thick spots. Now, if you have some of those at the end or tomorrow before the second coat, we can sand those down, we can scrape them off. So it's not a huge deal, but it's always good to minimize extra work for yourself. And it just takes a simple flattening it off like that. So remember, you want to wait, or you don't want to wait longer than 1.5 hours to 2 hours after you prime to do the concrete overlay. And then this can take anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours to dry, depending on your temperatures. If it's hotter, it's going to take less time to dry. Cooler temps, it's going to take a little longer. And we always like to throw fans on it, get some airflow going across the surface. That'll dry it out a lot faster too, because you can do multiple coats in one day. It just depends on how much you want to get done in one day. So we're going to let these set up. We'll come back tomorrow and show you guys a second coat. So before we apply our second coat, we want to just scrape the counters because a lot of that crushed marble is kind of sticking up and has a lot of peaks. So just running a scraper over it real quick, that's going to knock it flat and make that second coat go on a lot smoother. So you can kind of see all the peaks that I scraped off here. Right, so we're just running over real quick, doesn't take long. You can see like we got some drips here and stuff. We're just shaving those off. Got a big chunk here I'm gonna shave off. So you can see how rough I'm being. I'm not worried about scraping this stuff off. It bonds so well when we use our primers. This is basically ready for the next coat. So we'll go mix up the next coat and then we'll show you how to apply that one. All right guys, before we start the second coat, I want to show you how durable and how well our products bond to smooth surfaces. So remember, this was Formica. We did our prep replacement primer over that, and then we just did one coat. So this only has one coat. We're still doing another coat of this texture coat and then one more coat of scratch coat. So it's gonna get more layers on there, but this is just one coat, and I wanna show you how durable it is by dropping a coffee mug. I'm gonna try to have it land on the corner because that's obviously what's gonna chip it. And so we'll just go from maybe right here and drop it. We'll go a little higher. Maybe a little higher. So you can look, no chips anywhere on this thing. So it bonds extremely well when you guys are using our systems and our primers. So yeah, there you go. Now we'll get started on the next step. All right, so Tim's getting ready to mix that next batch up for the second coat. And what I like to do is pre-hydrate. We call it pre-hydrating. We're basically satisfying the surface with moisture because now that it's porous, it's a cement-based product, so it's porous, it's gonna wanna soak up moisture with whatever you put on it, and the second coat has polymers in it, water, it's got moisture basically. So this is gonna wind up soaking all of that out of that next coat. So by pre-hydrating and satisfying the surface before we apply that second coat, that's gonna give us more working time. It's not gonna dry that second coat out and make it hard to work with. So I always like to pre-hydrate, get everything wet, and then as we're coating, sometimes we'll hydrate as we go depending on how dry the surface gets. So I'm just using an Ace sprayer. We like the Ace sprayers because they always spray a good fan mist. And you'll see this will all darken up. And we're just using water. So the trick with hydrating is we don't want standing water or puddles. Now, I like to spray it first and pre-hydrate a little heavier because it's gonna soak in more. And then when we start to coat, if we have any puddle areas, I'll just wipe it off with a rag. So just try not to coat over any areas that are puddled up with water. Dry those off with a rag. But this will give you more working time than you would have if you didn't do this. So it's always good to hydrate. So before we apply our third step, which is the scratch coat, make sure you hydrate well. I always like to pre-hydrate like a half an hour before we start. And what I mean by that is spraying your counters, letting it soak in, spray it again, let it soak in. That way this concrete's completely satisfied of moisture and it's not gonna suck any of the moisture or polymers out of our scratch coat. So that's what we like to do. And then obviously if you have puddles, we'll just wipe them up with a rag. and then thing is going to give you a lot more working time with this product. So that's kind of what we did. We have a few dry spots that I'm not really worried about. So this is ready to go. We're just going to dump small sections out and just kind of work in sections. Get the top done, get the face done. Tim will start here on the island because we don't want to just start coating the whole counter. We want to get a couple foot sections done at a time and then just kind of keep moving on. But you can see how it's filling in all the low spots. The darker colors are all the high spots. So before this sets up completely, you can rub in any imperfections on your corners and really make them nice and rounded. That's what Tim's doing right now. He's just going along, really fine tuning those edges, and it makes them look like it was an actual poured into a form. So anything you can just kind of rub out. So I'll show you, like right here, we can tell it's kind of dried out. I can rub that in. All right, so if the material's too wet, you won't really be able to mold it very good. It'll kind of just do something like that. So let that set up a little bit more, and then you can rub it in more. So we're just kind of looking for the drier spots. And then if it gets too hard on you and you can't really mold it, you can take some 220 sandpaper and really fine tune those the next day before you top coat. So before we go to the next step, which is staining, I'm gonna go over sanding the counters and just kind of fine tuning them after that scratch coat. So we like to use 220 grit, hit all our corners. You just wanna be real careful on your corners. Never palm sand your corners. If you have to hit your top, you can palm sand that. You're not gonna wear through that. But be real careful on your peaks, on your corners, on the faces, on these. Hit them real light. Watch what you're doing, because last thing you wanna do is sand through those on this spot. If you have heavier spots, thicker spots, you can do 80 grit, 120, and then finish it off with the 220. That way you don't have scratch marks and everything in it. So we're gonna stain this. They want it darker. If you guys wanted that natural gray concrete look like they are now, you would just put our urethane on it now, but we're gonna show you guys the stain process next. And then last thing, make sure you wipe them clean, let it completely dry before you add that top coat. So we're ready for the stain process. I have the stain mixed up here, and it's an easy technique, just staining them with the rag. So we're gonna soak the rag, we're gonna wring it out, and then we're just gonna rub the black stain all over the counters and get it to the tone that we want. It's very simple. Now keep in mind, when you're doing lighter stains, you can't really rub those in. They'll just wipe right off. So the light browns, even the dark grays. So black and dark brown, you can do with this process. You can kind of rub it in. All those other stains that we offer, they really need to be sprayed on to create that light stain effect. So everything's basically ready. Again, we sanded, cleaned them really good. And this is a pretty fast process. Now, if you guys want just a natural gray counter, you would simply just top coat, apply our urethane over this, and you'd have that natural gray concrete. They want it a little bit darker. And these are some other projects we're gonna be launching soon. You can kind of see they're finishing up the breakfast bar. And then we also got the fireplace mantle. So you can kind of see the look that we're going for. Those projects will be launching soon as well. So you guys can see those also. But we're gonna focus on the kitchen now. So me and Tim are gonna get in here. We're gonna stain it. And then I think Tim's gonna scrape off a bunch of these drips that are on this inside edge, because remember, we had to refit the sink. We had to add more wood to the top to make that sink fit. So we just wanna make sure when we're done, they can simply set the sink in. They don't have to sand or do anything to cut any of the product out. So for this process, I'm just gonna dip the rag in the stain bucket, and then we're just gonna wring it out fairly good. That way we're not dripping everywhere. The biggest thing is to minimize drips or runs. So if I have a drip or a run out here, I wanna rub that in right away. But this is it, we're just circle motions. And just rub it in. So you can see the cool random pattern we have, and that's because on that second texture coat, we finished it off in all different directions. So that's how you create this really cool chattered pattern on it. Just looks really, really unique and custom. So that's pretty much it for staining. We just kind of continue that process. And then once we're all done, if we have any lighter spots or darker spots, which we probably will, I'll kind of show you how to rub those in and fix those as well. All right, so I'm gonna show you how to kind of blend this in. You can see we have a bunch of like dark spots on there. This side's really light. You'll probably get that your first time staining, which is totally fine, easy to fix. We're just gonna take a dry rag, right? This isn't really soaked up. It's pretty dry, still has stain on it though. And I'm just gonna go and start hitting these light spots. And again, we always wanna do circle motions, and this will feather it all out. Don't hit the spots that are dark again. I'm just gonna go around and hit all the light spots. And that's it. So you can see how much more even that looks. And then we can hit this face also. So you can really fine tune the staining wherever it's needed.